everybody, welcome to our second workshop of the spring 2020 semester. My name's Garrett. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. I'm so happy, I'm so excited, I'm so grateful to have you here for our second workshop. I am pumped for you to experience our guest speaker later on this evening. But before we get started, I want to touch up on a couple of quick points. So you are starting your mentor relationship. That is awesome. Hopefully you've had your first conversation. I'd love to learn about it. Post maybe about some of the key talking points that you've had for your first meeting in the comment section. Would love to learn about how that first meeting has gone. But yeah, this workshop's all about how to network in a genuine way and really make the most out of it. This workshop should be about an hour long. And if you've got any questions during this workshop, please post them in the comment section. As a reminder, I'm going to ask you 3 questions during the duration of this workshop. Once we have asked those questions, I'll expect you to answer them. That's how you get credit for participating and being here at the workshops. I'm really excited for you to experience our guest speaker tonight. I'm really excited to dive into this. Now, this is what's really key. I mean, genuine networking is such a pivotal component to building rapport, to getting job offers, to getting promotions. Really, if you can hone this skill, if you can hone this ability, you will be set professionally, because ultimately, at the end of the day, your hard skills, that being your ability to crunch numbers, to do some form of engineering, to do some form of science, like all those things are pretty good. They're very easy to measure. So it's very clear whether or not you are better or worse than somebody on a hard skill. But your soft skills are much more difficult to measure. But those soft skills are really what's going to set you apart. I mean, as they say, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. And this is the workshop about how you can know more people and have a stronger bond with them, because then it goes to your reputation. Because if you have a reputation for treating people like garbage, you're not going to have a great reputation. People are going to want to help connect you with other people. If you come in with low energy, if you come in with a bad state, if you come in talking trash about other people, you're not going to put yourself in a good position. And so I want to be very clear. When it comes to networking, when it comes to building a relationship, it is not all about the transaction. If you're coming into a networking situation, you're thinking to yourself, what is in it for me? You are not going to have a positive outcome. I promise you on that. I really want to be clear. It's not all about landing the job or the internship. Sometimes it's about building the relationship and then playing the long game, because ultimately that may turn into an opportunity because they built a rapport with you. But if you burn them, or if you make them feel like you are using them to get to a location that you would like to be, they can smell that on you. They can smell it from a mile away. And that is not great. As they say, desperation reeks. You do not want to be desperate. You don't want to be perceived as someone that's a user or a taker. You want to be a giver. You want to be someone who gives energy to relationships. The first place to start is being genuine with how you talk to people and how you build rapport with people. Now, this is something we talked about last time, but it is so important, and that is the 3 keys to success in this program. That is honing your strategy, your story, and your state. As we've said before, your state is most important. So physically, how are you? Physically, what is going on with your world? Physically, I don't care what is happening. If you recently broke up with your significant other, if your dog just died, if you got some bad news, I don't care what's going on. If you get up, if you shake it out, if you let it loose, you will get yourself into a positive state. So I want to challenge you to do that right now. I want you to get up, and I want you to shake it loose. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. Just go, yeah, just let it out, let it loose, let it go. Because what you're doing is you're releasing blood to your brain. You're releasing endorphins. You're getting yourself into a state conducive for retaining information. If you're just sitting there on a couch or in a chair in a slumped over position, your likelihood of retaining any of the information we talk about tonight is severely diminished. But if you come in standing up, moving around, getting your blood flowing, you are much more likely to retain this information. Have you ever found it difficult in a classroom setting to remember what your professor says if you've been sitting for 3 hours? That's why 3-hour lectures really struggle to work. They're not very effective because people are not moving around. Your brain needs blood to retain information. So get up, get moving, get out, get loose. Now, the second key is your story. What is the story you tell yourself for why you will or will not be successful? I promise you right now, you will achieve up to the goals that you set for yourself in life and no higher. So you might as well shoot for the stars and land on the moon than shoot for the moon and end up in nowhere. Because if you are not focused about where you want to be, or really having a big, hairy, crazy, audacious goal for yourself, what are you doing? Like, are you just saying to yourself, like, I'm cool with winding up short, with, settling down and just settling for everything in my life? If that's the case, this program's not for you. I can tell you that right now. This program's not for you if you're trying to settle. But if you're someone that wants to go for it, if you want to go big, if you want to go out there for the opportunities that you want to see in your life, this program is absolutely for you. Let this program be a springboard. Let your mentor be a Sherpa that's guiding you up this mountain of life and success and help you get to where you want to be. This is someone who wants to guide you, that wants to help you. They wouldn't have signed up for this program if they weren't interested in seeing you succeed. So I want to be very clear with you. What is the story for why you will be successful? Understand that, hone it, be prepared. In fact, I would challenge you to write this down. Write it on a piece of paper. It's more likely to stick in your mind if you write it on a piece of paper of where you want to be. Stick it up on your wall. Stick it up on your desk. Stick it up on your dresser. Stick it up on your mirror. Something that's going to remind you of where you want to be in 1 month, 3 months, 1 year from now. That will help you set the target of where you want to go. Because if you don't set these goals, you're going to be on a path that's got really no clear outcome of where you want to go. So the last part is your strategy. What are you going to do to set yourself apart? Now, when it comes to strategies, I'm a big believer in routines. When I say routines, I mean literally getting into a daily habit that you can practice regularly so then you can be better at a skill. We think about habits sometimes in a negative light because we think about people just being addicted to bad actions, but I believe that habits can also be attributed in a positive light as well. What is a positive habit you can get into to help you build more genuine relationships? I believe one thing you can do is to be intentional about having an informational interview every single week with a new person, with a new professional in your field. You can leverage LinkedIn. You could go to a professor's office hours. You could talk to a friend of yours whose parent works in the field that you're interested in working towards, or a family friend that you know works in the field that you're interested in working towards. If you set up one informational interview every single week, and by an informational interview, I want to be very clear. This is a conversation. This isn't an interview. You're not trying to get a job from this person. You're just trying to get knowledge about what this work is like. Set up one of those a week. I can promise you they're going to start making introductions for you. They're going to start helping you get to where you want to be. By the way, if your goals change over time, that's okay. That's totally okay. You can share with them how your goals have changed. They're going to want to keep helping you over time. I'll give you a perfect example of this. As an entrepreneur, I set goals all the time. I have a board of mentors. I literally have about 50 to 100 mentors that I send once every 3 months an update of what's going on with the business. Here's the thing though. I've pivoted this business many, many times. Now, initially when I first got started, I was thinking to myself like, oh, well, they're my mentors. Like, if I tell them that I've pivoted, will they think I'm a total failure? Will they not want to help me anymore? What I found is that is absolutely not the case. They're always there to support me. Mentors that have been with me for 5+ years still give me guidance, still help make introductions, still help me out and support me as my mission has grown, as my goals have grown. That is the nature of mentoring relationships. That is the nature of relationships in general. You should keep your network up to date with what is going on in your world because they will want to see you succeed. But the key is that you ask them for something specific. When I meet with my mentors or when I send them an email, I ask for something very, very specific. I don't say, hey, if you know anybody in XYZ space, if you could introduce me, would love that. Why? Because it's not at the top of their mind. What I'll do is I'll physically go onto their LinkedIn profile, look at who they're connected with and say, hey, I noticed that you're connected with Jane Doe, John Doe, Shelby Doe, and Jenny Doe. I know that you may not be connected with all 4 of those people, but if you are connected with one of them, would you mind introducing me? Here's an email template that you could copy and paste to introduce me. Now I've made it extremely specific and easy for them to take an action step to help me out. And that is how you can continue to grow your relationships, your network, and build rapport with people. And just keep them in the loop of what's going on in your world. So I just want to be very clear. It's about building genuine relationships. And it's about when you're building those genuine relationships and then you're asking them for introductions or connecting with more people through those relationships, being very specific and making it as easy as possible for them to help you out. I really want to stress this. It's so important. Genuine networking. If you can take anything from this whole program, if it's genuine networking, and by genuine networking, I mean really listening, taking an active and keen interest in who you are speaking with, you are going to be set. You're going to be in a great position. Because at the end of the day, it's not your elevator pitch. It's not going to be anything about you that makes someone interested in you. It's going to be about your ability to listen to them. In fact, I can tell you multiple times where I didn't say a word in a conversation. I just nodded my head yes and asked questions about things that somebody else has said. And at the end of the conversation, whether that be 30 minutes or 60 minutes long, they said, man, Garrett, you are such a great conversationalist. Or, gosh, I feel like I just had such a great conversation with you. And the funniest thing about it is I didn't actually say a word. The point is this: people love to talk about themselves. Why? Because people are really interested in things that they're interested in. People wouldn't choose to spend the time that they have on this earth in the way that they did unless they thought it was the most optimum way of spending their time. Therefore, things that interest them, things that they choose to spend their time on, are things that interest them and ultimately make you interesting to them because you've taken an interest in those actions and activities. I hope that makes sense. If you want to rewatch that, take that back 30 seconds because I think it's really important. People ultimately, at the end of the day, people care about themselves. People care about things that they are interested in because they've chosen to spend the time that they have on those tasks. So with that said, I'm excited to jump in to our guest speaker this evening. Really, the whole point of this workshop is about genuine networking. If you've got any questions for myself or for our guest speaker, please post them in the comments section. By the way, if you have not connected with me on LinkedIn, please do. I'll add you to our LinkedIn group where we discuss different topics and just you can add different topics, ask any questions, and expand it to our entire Ambition in Motion network. Connect with me. I'll add you to the group. But yeah, I'm so excited to get started. Let's jump into our guest speaker this evening. So I'm so excited to have our guest here this evening. When we're talking about how to network in a genuine way, I'm really excited to share with you Andrea's story and some of the work that she's done. Andrea Constantine found her Ikigai, or reason for being, in 2019. In 2011, she was dead set on law school. She was somebody that definitely wanted to go to law school, but because of student debt, she ended up making a change of heart and having a change of heart and making a change of career path. And she then worked for Estee Lauder, Bloomberg, and Goldman Sachs. And she eventually learned that her true goal is to help people achieve fiscal happiness, with the key emphasis on both fiscal and happiness. Like, they go together. Fiscal happiness does not just mean making a whole bunch of money. There's the key part of happiness and the key part of fiscally being responsible and just satisfied or being just where you think you're supposed to be. And I think she does a really great job of outlining the key differences between that. If you take anything from Andrea, it's to have a growth mindset and to express genuine interest in all people. Andrea, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Wonderful to be here as well. Thank you.
So, Andrea, we're here to talk about how to network in a genuine way. And I think to maybe get started, because I briefly kind of glossed over your story, would you be okay if you just shared with us a little bit of your story and your Ikigai and just kind of how that all kind of came to be, and then we could start diving into more specific topics about how to network in a genuine way?
Absolutely. So my Ikigai was something that I got to after a journey of many years. As you mentioned, in 2011, I completely changed course and decided not to go to law school. It was something that completely broke my family's heart, literally to the point that when we would speak during that year, which my senior year of university, we would just talk to say, hey, how are you? Are you alive? Are you healthy? Okay, bye. Because my parents just didn't have that growth mindset to be open to understanding that there's more I could do and I could have a really good career. And I think part of that comes from being Eastern European. I'm first generation American, and I think that, certain cultures value higher education. But in 2011, it was right after the financial crisis. The market was really different. Being a lawyer was really different. And so I started going out into the work world. I knew I liked to work with people. I was outgoing, caring, a hard worker. There was actually this Talent Plus assessment that I had to do for my first job. And they had identified some of these things as my top 5, quote, talents. And I think that it took me from 2012 to just last year, 2019, to understand how to put that together into Ikigai, which is this reason for being, and it's at the intersection of what you're good at, what the world needs, what you can be paid for as well, because so much of that matters. Like, how do you bring your full self and passion to work? And my passion comes in interacting with people to help the world be a better place in the form of helping people understand their emotional and financial well-being. And ironically, actually, I am just starting a new position, a new job with a company that is going to be focused on doing talent research, because I think that a large part of our fiscal happiness has to do with our careers. And so that is me putting my Ikigai into focus. And yeah, I ended up getting here after having a job at Estee Lauder Companies in a presidential management track, which was this accelerated development program. And then I was a corporate marketing analytics associate. Then I moved into finance and I worked at Bloomberg Tradebook, which was the agency brokerage part of Bloomberg, like, you know, Bloomberg Terminals, Bloomberg News. They have this part that's dedicated to trading for, you know, hedge funds and institutional clients. And I was on the quantitative marketing team there. And then I moved on to the trading desk, actually. So I have some experience as an equities trader. And I noticed after about a little over 2 years there that, you know, things were changing and I knew I would be safe, but you know, if the company went through some kind of transition, but I wanted to be a champion of my own career. And so I started looking for other positions. And through networking, I ended up at an investment banking company, actually. And so I was there for a bit. And most recently, I was at Goldman Sachs, once again in electronic trading agency brokerage. And now I'm transitioned over to my new position, which I feel like I'm finally going to be able to bring my full self to work, represent this Ikigai, and I'll be doing talent network insights research. So you can see from there, my background is really diverse. It's a winding path. It's proof that you can continue moving forward towards finding yourself, even if you're not following a traditional way forward.
Yeah, I know. I really like that. I like the perspective and the lens that you come from, because you're leaving Goldman Sachs into this new role, and you know, I would imagine, and obviously, maybe it's not obvious. I've never worked for Goldman Sachs. But I've heard the rumors. I'm heard that people who work at Goldman Sachs are well compensated. And so, with that said, it's fascinating. I'd love to learn more or less, kind of like from the fiscal happiness transition from your mind. How does that kind of, like, I guess maybe my assumption is that you were probably very well compensated at Goldman Sachs, and then you're transitioning to this new company. What, I guess, into this new transition for yourself, from, I guess, like a mental standpoint and a personal happiness standpoint, is that one of the bigger factors that kind of factored into that decision?
Compensation is always an important thing because, you know, especially having student loans, I've written articles about this actually, where companies end up ultimately paying the price of us having to take out student debt to attend these top universities, because unfortunately the older way of going about hiring was to look at people that attend, you know, particular universities that have recruiting. But the thing is that I believe there has to be, and there is a trend towards finding the talent where they are, even if they go to any school out there, because a lot of us are very capable, are very intelligent, have a ton of talents and capabilities, and we go to a range of universities, whether it's community college or whether it's a top tier university. There's a lot of talent out there, and we need to meet them where they are. And that's part of why I'm so excited about being in this new position and helping this startup work towards getting that message out there about meeting people and the talent where they are. But I think that the compensation only goes so far, and I feel like our generation is more comfortable with knowing that there's a balance that we need to strike. And I would say that it actually goes back to thanking our parents' generation for making us understand, like, hey, you can get divorced. Like, you can break the bonds of a husband and wife. And, you know, nowadays, it's not just bonds between a husband and wife. And I think that helped us start to apply that kind of lesson to our workplace as well. And in the workplace, say, our managers and our teammates, we have to hold each other to a higher standard and a higher expectation of how we treat each other and what we look forward to receive in the workplace. And so compensation, yeah, people perceive that of these big corporate companies, and the companies I've mentioned, Estee Lauder, Bloomberg, Goldman, yeah, they're all bigger companies that tend to have higher possibility for compensation. But that isn't to say that startups, that lesser known companies are not going to compensate you significantly. I mean, I will say I did get quite a nice pay increase when I transitioned companies in the past. And they often say that too. You're going to get your biggest increases when you change jobs. That's not to say you need to change jobs to get pay increases. And that's not to say that when you find a company that's wonderful, a place where you're truly valued and respected, that you don't need to change jobs. But I think you should stay there. Like, needing to change just for the sake of change, like, that's the thing that gives us a bad reputation as millennials. So yeah, I think your question was about compensation and, how does that influence the decision? It, of course, has to be part of the conversation, and you need to make sure you have your livelihood. I have to make sure I can make my student loan payments and not pay an arm and a leg in interest. But at the same time, there's more to the conversation and to how we figure out how to go about our career progression.
I love that. I love the angle that you took on that. One question before we jump into our main topic of how to network in a genuine way, but I guess the question I had for you is it possible, like, did you have an inkling of what your Ikigai would be earlier on in your career? Like, if I were to ask the audience, the students here watching, like, if they would even have an inkling of their Ikigai, is that something that would be reasonable, or is it something that you develop over time?
I definitely developed it over time. It came through the journey of meeting people, of networking genuinely. And I like to think about it as just puzzle pieces that were spread out over the course of, I'm 29 now. So over the course of my last 28, 29 years, it's like puzzle pieces that kind of showed themselves. When I was, maybe phase one is, between being born and going to college. Then when you're in university, you kind of become a different person. And then after university, I'd say, 21 to 26 was a different phase of my life. 26 to 29 was, a level of getting much closer to this Ikigai. And then now forward, it's going to be a matter of implementing. And, now it's actually, when I got to the point of realizing what I wanted to do with my life and this reason for being, it actually made it much harder, because when you know what you want to do, it narrows your field significantly. So it's no longer that I can look out and say, oh, I have these skills for this job and that job and that job, and they're all over the place. Now it's like, I know what I want to do, and I've narrowed my field in, and I'm going to be purposeful to go there. But that also means, like, you're going to have to deal with having a smaller sample size to look into. It's actually really ironic, because when I was at Georgetown, I was studying finance, and I hated finance. I was studying it because of my family recommending that it would be really helpful for when I become a lawyer. And so I always thought I'd love to study psychology. I was much more of a people-oriented person. I have the soft skills that, unfortunately, in the past, people found it to be more of a weakness if you had soft skills, well, quote, soft skills in a workplace. But being empathetic, being understanding, having an open mind, being able to coordinate with people and work towards common goals, like, those are really powerful things that I think are even more essential when you think about the way technology has shifted the role of humans in the workplace. So if I was able to go from hating finance to now working on spreadsheets and helping people with their financial advice and taking personal finance exams myself, like the chartered financial consultant, then I think that this is hopefully a message to people to be like, even if you don't like something now, you might end up coming to love it later.
You know what? I love that. And I think that, by the way, I think that's across the board. I think there's many things that we've had in life where we started not liking them, and then we eventually, like, almost took a keen liking to it. I love to ask the student audience right now, has there ever been a scenario in your life where you initially thought you would not like something and then you ended up loving it, or vice versa, where you thought you loved something, you're like, I don't know if that's the right thing for me? And this could be a major, this could be a career path, this could be a volunteer opportunity, it could be an internship. Post something in the comment section. I'd love to learn, is there something that your expectations didn't meet reality, either good or bad? I'd love to learn about that in the comment section. So let's dive into the actual topic, Andrea. I would love to learn, what does genuine networking look like to you? I think when I say genuine networking, I really want to stress the importance of the word genuine, because I think sometimes as students, we think to ourselves, it's like networking is this really stressful hassle where we have to go meet with people, and then I have to be uncomfortable, and I have to learn from these people, or I have to put myself out there, and I'm not quite used to doing that. And so sometimes what I'll observe is students will treat networking like as if it's a transaction, like, hey, I'm here to get this internship. Do you have something for me? No, bye. Yeah. So and by the way, when I say that, students, that is not the way to network. And so I want to ask you, Andrea, what does genuine networking look like to you?
So I've definitely been there when I was in university trying to get a job. When I was August, decided, okay, I'm not going to law school. I'm going to need a job by May, and all of this debt is going to come due. So I definitely can understand I need to be purposeful, get the biggest bang for my buck for every interaction that I have. But you're right, that's not the most effective way forward. And so what I've learned is that genuine networking has to do with taking an interest in meeting someone, having a deeper conversation, getting to know them, and being okay meeting just one person and having a really, really good conversation rather than multiple kind of high level, not so good, grabbing people's cards without actually having something tangible to reach back out on. So yeah, I think it's just genuine networking is being okay just getting to know one person and having a true, I don't want to use the word genuine because it's like using the definition in the answer in the definition, but it's just wanting to get to know who a person is rather than what can they do for you.
I would almost view it as having an intentional focus on really focusing on who that person is. If I'm hearing you right,
Yeah.
In terms of genuine networking, just being intentional about listening to what that other person has to say and really caring what they have to say. Forget the whole elevator pitch thing. Forget the whole oh, I have to pitch you on how good I am, how great I am, why you should think about me. Screw that. Get rid of that. Yeah, I think eradicate that notion in your mind, because people care about themselves, and when you care about them, they will want to take a greater interest in you because you cared about them first.
Yes, and the thing is, when you attend an event and people are there, versus when you meet someone one-on-one and have a conversation that has been organized through whatever the channel might be, it's a little bit different what your approach is. But in both cases, it will, I think, help you much more and take off some of the burden if you express an interest in getting to know who that person is. And then from hearing them speak, it'll kind of trigger things in your own mind to be able to know how to contribute to the conversation in a way that builds the conversation up. And it's also really important, I think, to not think about what's in it for me all the time. And I feel personalities make it, and, our expectations about ourselves can sometimes make it difficult because we think, oh, we need to get the biggest bang for our buck. If we help someone, we have to make sure we're helping someone who's definitely needy, rather than something I found, which is just help anybody, because you never know who can truly benefit from kindness or a smile. Similarly, you never know who is going to end up being a really good connection in that moment, and in the future being able to connect you down the line to a job, let's say, or to something even more. And if you strip away the concern of, am I getting the most bang for my buck for this conversation, then you can allow yourself to be in the moment, have a conversation that's meaningful, and also just let your gut check. Some conversations will not go that well, and you're just going to have to be okay. Don't think, oh, what did I do or say that this person left? Just, we all have different ways of being, but so long as you go in wanting to just get to know someone and see what their story is, then I feel like that is the first really important step to being genuine, and then letting your network grow.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds like it follows very much Adam Grant's Give and Take. You read that book. It just really, he talks about the notion that givers gain, and by that I just mean people who are willing to give to other people without an alternative idea of something to get in return. So whether that means if you give with the intention of only getting something back, that would be someone who Adam Grant would consider a matcher. Or if you take as much as you can and try to give as minimal as you can to kind of get the, in your mind, the greatest ROI from a small short-term circumstance, it doesn't work out over the long term. In fact, the research indicates that givers gain more often than not. And so being a nice person you're not going to get walked over. It will. Karma does exist. I think really give and take, like the power, the science behind does karma actually exist? And I believe the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I totally agree. I mean, I am an example of trying to be a giver. So I give out these smile cards to people that are meant to encourage connection among friends and strangers alike. And it's something that I just started. It's part of what helped me find my Ikigai, actually, because, yeah, being okay and recognizing that having empathy is actually a strength, and empathy comes along with caring for other people. It's really valuable. I haven't read that book, but I did read, and one of my favorite ones as of recently is called Big Potential by Sean Acor. And he says that small potential is when you're in it for yourself, or you kind of think about doing things on your own, but big potential is when we help each other flourish.
I love that. That's super cool. Well, since our program's all about mentorship and helping people connect with other people and build deep relationships, how has your network helped you with your career path? I'd love to learn about that.
Well, every single job that I got, except my very first one, which was recruiting out of college, I got because of my network. And that doesn't mean that I've always been this incredible networker. No, I used to get really nervous to the point that I would, be really unsure of what to say or think. That I would take, if I was at a talk, I would take so many notes, and then I would kind of try to review that, and then maybe I would end up kind of sabotaging myself because I wouldn't pay that much attention in the conversation, in the talk that I was attending. Or, I would feel like I had to do so much prep work. So it's the point of, feeling like there's a lot of anxiety around networking. But I think that maybe some of that helped me become more comfortable now. But I think part of it was like just being comfortable and knowing that if you talk to people and you have a good conversation, great. If you screw up, you're probably never going to see them again. Just, use these opportunities to practice. And I am really fortunate that, mentorship absolutely helps. So when I moved from Estee Lauder Companies to Bloomberg, the way that I got that job was actually through a mentor that I met at Georgetown. And I met him in December of 2011. And then we kind of stayed in touch here and there. It's not like you have to, when you have a network, it's not like you have to stay in touch with people all the time. And you can check back in after 6 months, a year. And so I checked back in with him. His name is Jeff. And I had, given him an update on here's how I'm doing. Here's, what my career's been looking like. I'd like to go into finance. That's what I studied in undergrad. And I feel like I actually want to give that a chance now. And I told him I was looking at Bloomberg, and he said, oh, I actually know someone who worked with the people who are the hiring managers for that exact position. And so through him, I ended up connecting with this woman. She then actually knew the guy who became my manager and the head of that department. And years later, when I was at Bloomberg, I had a conversation with one of the people on my team, and he was more senior, and he said, the way you got this job was that you were persistent. You found people who could end up giving you a connection. You messaged us all directly on LinkedIn, and you were persistent. And that is something that we valued because it was between you and someone else who had experience in the industry, and we picked you because of your persistence.
I love that story. Andrea, that's an amazing story. It's so powerful, really it is. I think the key nuggets from that were, one, every single job you've gotten except for the first job you got out of college, came through your network. So for students who are out there, you think like, oh man, I really got to focus on this class project that's coming up. Like that class project will literally mean nothing in 6 months from now. But these mentor relationships that you're building through this program and through the people that you know in college, and just from these relationships that you're building and growing, like that could be the key, like catalyst for you landing your future professional opportunities. Like I think I really want to stress how important. I mean, don't get me wrong, schoolwork is important. Your GPA is fine and dandy, but that network is so critical. Like, don't let that die.
Yes. I mean, school is definitely important. Your GPA I have seen applications where it was like you needed to have over a 3.33 in order to be considered. So GPA is important. And also your classmates for those projects could end up being your network in the future. So there is a balance. It's like you don't want to be the slacker who everyone's like, oh, that person totally slacked. But at the same time, you want to be effective or efficient in terms of how you're applying your time. And your network is essential. And your network will build up over time, because clearly here there was one person who connected me to someone else, who then connected me to the people who became my managers. But it's also possible for your network to just kind of appear. So when I was deciding to move from Bloomberg, because I could sense, change was coming, and change actually did come about 2 months after I left. They had a big reorg. But in that time, it was the summer, and I commuted from Jersey City into Manhattan, and the ferry didn't come one morning. And there were 2 other gentlemen who were also waiting for the ferry that didn't come. We decided to go elsewhere and take a different way into Manhattan. And on the way, we just started talking. And I had been looking around interviewing at that time, so I was kind of like aware of what it was that I had to present myself, but in a way that it wasn't like I thought I was pitching myself. But after that 10-minute walk to the other ferry, the guy said, we actually are looking for someone like you. Can we set up a coffee? And I'd like to hear more about your background and see if you would be a fit for our position. So that was like a completely random, out of left field. I had no idea I was actually pitching myself. It was a Friday. It was like a casual Friday. I was not dressed up by any means. But, it just shows that you never know who you're going to meet. So just be yourself, be natural, have a genuine interest in getting to know who people are. Don't have your headphones in all the time, and just be open to the world around you. And that ended up being how I got the investment banking position.
That's so cool. I would say I shared with the students earlier in our first workshop that my very first internship offer came sitting next to a guy in an airplane. So that type of thing does happen all the time. I think like sometimes I'll hear from students who be like, but that's like a 1 in a million type of opportunity. And I'm like, it's really not. It happens a whole lot more frequently than one may realize. So being open to opportunities is so critical. And it makes me think, I'd love to ask students in the audience a quick question. And that question is, what are some ways that you think that you could be more intentional about building your network while you're a college student? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn what your thoughts are on how can you be more intentional about building your network, building genuine relationships with other people while you're still in college, so then you can start building out that network and not thinking about it from a scenario of like alternative agendas, but really building deep relationships with people that you want to be around, maybe for the rest of your life, just tangentially connected. So I'd love to learn, how do you want to stay connected with people? Post in the comment section.
Actually, that helps. Is it okay to give my thought about an answer for that? Okay.
Yeah, please.
I think LinkedIn can absolutely help with that, because LinkedIn can be a fantastic resource for being able to connect with people, even if you don't meet them in person. You never know how that can end up transitioning into something wonderful. And an example of that is yes, our conversation and how we met. It was because actually, I think, was it Jeff who had commented on one of your posts? And or someone in my network had commented on one of your posts. I saw it, I looked at your information, I was interested, sent you a message, and now here we are. So yeah, this is an example of that. And another example of that is actually this new job I will be starting. I can link it back to LinkedIn. Back in 2017, a professor from Georgetown reached out to me on LinkedIn saying that he's trying to build a group of alumni who would be willing to volunteer to proofread the manuscripts of students in his book writing program. And I looked at his background. It was fascinating. I said, yes, absolutely. I will be happy to proofread anything. And I love doing writing myself. I ended up having a conversation. I said, can we set up a phone call? Because I would like to hear more about you and see if maybe there's anything that I could learn from for my career. And so this was end of 2017. We chatted on the phone. Admittedly, some of his advice, I was like, not that happy receiving, because some of it was really harsh. It was like, you're doing too many things at once. You need to become more purposeful. But at the same time, it's like, you can't figure out what you want to do until you do many things. At least that's what I believe. And so at that time, I wasn't ready for that advice, but now I am. And also last year in May or so, 2019, So this was like a year and a half later, I got a message from him on LinkedIn again saying, I'm opening up my book writers program to alumni as well. Would you like to join? And I had been working on a book with my mom. So I said, yes, absolutely. I joined. While I was in the program, I ended up connecting with someone else who had an interesting topic, really different from mine, but he just seemed like a cool person. We have never met in person, but we had a phone call conversation. We talked about our books. We gave each other ideas. One of his ideas had to do with me reaching out to a woman who he had interviewed for his book. And she's also Eastern European from Romania. And he thought that she would be a great person for me to just talk with because my book had some like cultural components to it. I sent her a message on LinkedIn. So right now we are 3 LinkedIn messages deep. We are the original Georgetown professor, the person part of my writing program, and now this woman who is a professor at Stanford and specializes in memory and has workshops around that too. And then she ended up coming to New York. I met with her in person, and while she was here, she said, hey, do you want to go with me to a book launch? And she mentioned the name of the company. I thought I had heard of them before, and so I said, absolutely. And so being open to going to that book launch, going there, asking questions during the Q&A period led to the president and CEO of this startup noticing me, wanting to talk some more, asking me about my writing. And now here we are, a few months later, several months later, I'm going to be starting working with them in my new position. So my new job, my most recent one, which is allowing me to finally bring my full self to work, is a function of 3 LinkedIn messages and accepting an invitation to a book launch. So it just shows that none of this was me thinking like, what's in it for me? It was just kind of going along and letting karma and letting the world just piece things together for me.
And so that kind of leads to the next question. I think you've already more or less answered it, but are people generally helpful? Like, I think for any students that are out there that are like, oh man, but that story could never happen to me. I don't have any professors that reach out to me for anything. I don't know how that could ever happen. I guess the question I have to ask you is, are people for the most part generally helpful?
Yes, people are generally helpful. People are also going to not respond. So for people who say, oh, I don't get a response, or I send out messages and I only got 1 response back, all you need is 1 response. And I have sent out numerous messages. Like when I was searching for jobs before that one where I met the gentleman on the ferry, I would look online, I would use different job search websites, and then I would go onto LinkedIn, I would search for people who worked at that job, I would send them messages through LinkedIn saying, I'm applying, I see you work there, I would love to learn from you. And of the probably 50, 60, 70 messages I sent, I would get a few responses back. And I think that's fine. You know, you kind of figure out a way to be most effective. Like you have a pre-canned format that you follow so you can copy paste over. But again, that kind of goes to leveraging like LinkedIn, leveraging a network. If you can have a network where you see that a person's a second connection, that works even better. If you can ask people to make an introduction for you, that's even better. But, you know, people are helpful. When you attend events and you talk to people in person, they're going to be more likely to be helpful. When you reach out to them through LinkedIn, all you need is 1 response. So don't think, oh, I'm not going to do it because I won't get an answer, because you never know, and you'll get better at writing your messages the more that you do it. So just get out there and start trying it, because as you said, karma is a true thing. And if you put your faith out there, you're going to, not to be like a spiritual thing or anything, but like if you just put yourself out there and build up your confidence and build up your experience writing these messages and reach out to people, it'll be more easy when it comes to the person who will actually respond.
That's awesome. So let's say I'm starting to put myself out there. I'm starting to reach out to people, and I have a first conversation. How can I ask more? How can I practice asking more engaging questions?
Well, so I think that a lot of the time before having these conversations, back when I was like doing this more new, or you know, when I was out of college or still in university, I would actually just ask my actual friends or my parents. Or I would go to the career counseling place at work, or excuse me, at school. I didn't have that many mentors, but the gentleman who I mentioned earlier, he was someone who I would reach out to, and I would say, these are the types of questions that I think I would like to ask. Or before having a particular informational interview, I would ask him what he thought that I should ask. And so asking other people and being okay not knowing all the answers, especially when you're starting out, is really valuable. And I know that many people think, and when you're in your early mid-20s, you think you need to have all the answers to look more professional. But the thing is, it's okay to not know. And that's part of having a growth mindset, is knowing that if you don't know something, you'll learn it and you'll adapt and you'll incorporate it into your knowledge base going forward. So I think that to prepare for asking questions, reach out to people in your network. Reach out to them with questions that you have in mind, so they know that it's not like you're looking to them to do all the work. You've done the work and you're looking for them to validate it or elaborate. It's much easier for people to elaborate than to come up with stuff from scratch. Questions that I think are really important to ask when you're in a one-on-one conversation, which again, one-on-ones that are scheduled and more purposeful are different than meeting people at an event. So for those one-on-ones, you want to take that opportunity to get to know the nitty-gritty about what is the bright side and the dark side of particular jobs. Asking people, if you were starting out now, would you end up wanting to do the same thing? What do you know now that you didn't know when you started? What's different now than when you started? Technology has changed things immensely. Compensation has changed immensely. And so it's a matter of asking people, when you're having these informational conversations, what they truly believe, because when you're having an interview, it's going to be harder to get the true guts of the highs and the lows of working in particular industries or companies.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So I'd love to take a moment to ask the audience a quick question. Are there any go-to questions that you, as a student watching this video right now, are there any go-to questions that you like to ask in informational interviews, or that you would like to ask in informational interviews? Maybe you've not had any informational interviews yet. And by the way, I really want to distinguish the difference between informational interviews and professional interviews. Informational interviews are not an interview for a job. They are having a conversation with another professional to get insight into what that career is like. The professional interview is you getting dressed up, putting on a suit, and interviewing for a specific role. They are very different things. And I just want to be very clear when I say that. So when I say, what are some go-to questions you like to ask during an informational interview, a question would not be, so what's the starting salary of your role? That would not be it. But I'd love to learn from your perspective as students watching this video, what are some go-to questions that you like to ask as go-tos for having conversations with people, learning about their career path, or that you would like to ask? Post that in the comment section. I would love to learn. So one question that I want to ask you, Andrea, is, do you take notes? When you're in an actual informational interview, do you take notes during the interview? What are your thoughts on the concept of taking handwritten notes?
Yes. At the least, I always have my notebook open and my pen ready next to the notepad. You don't have to have your pen in hand and be really rigid up at the table. It's good to have good posture. It's good to have open posture. Closed posture is having your arms crossed or being leaned back. Probably, I don't know how well that's coming out here, but I'm kind of acting them out. Open posture is having maybe one hand on the table. If there's an armrest, having a hand on the armrest. You could, if you need to hold something, if you worry about fidgeting, hold your pen in that case. And it's a matter of leaning towards the person. It's just these types of things will show you and show the person that you are engaged and you're looking to hear what they have to say. Not everyone thinks about that. So if a person closes their arms, that doesn't mean that they're not engaged in listening to you anymore. But it's just good as the person who is there trying to seek the informational interview to just be aware of it. And again, it'll come easier with time. And with practice, it'll also come easier to maybe have these kinds of conversations with friends and ask them, okay, what are my quirks? Do I scratch my head too much? Like I've known people, even senior people, who will kind of touch their eyebrows, scratch, go like this to their eye. Like there are things that we just all do that we don't realize, and it's helpful to have someone kindly tell us and be open to hearing that. Like I have a friend who does a lot of speaking, and he always clears his throat and goes, excuse me. And I had to let him know, like, hey, you don't have to excuse yourself. It's okay. So that's the body language part. But in terms of taking notes, yes, I think that taking notes is important. I've kind of practiced taking notes, writing while still looking at people, because if someone is talking to you and you're looking down too much, it's going to impact the flow, I think, of the conversation. So maybe keywords to yourself, but you don't have to write a novel. Just write down key things like a question that you'd like to come back to, or some way of reminding yourself, hey, they said something interesting and I want to ask them to elaborate on it. Notes help for that. Notes also help immensely when it comes to having a follow-up, because the biggest mistake anyone can make to shoot themselves in the foot is not follow up after an informational interview. And it's really hard it's really hard to follow up if you don't have notes to say, hey, I really loved what you said about XYZ, and happy birthday to your daughter because you said it's coming next week. Like, just remember little things like that show that you listen. When you really listen and you show someone that, then going to your question earlier, people are going to be even more inclined to stay in touch with you if they feel like you listened to what they had to say and took away an understanding of them, not just an understanding of what you thought would help you in your own endeavors.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's a really great insight. And I love that you talked about body language too. I'm a big believer in matching and mirroring. And by that, I just mean imitating the behavioral actions of somebody else, because people build a subconscious bond between them and themselves when they feel like there's a subconscious connection. So if somebody is crossing their arms, I would care to argue it would be appropriate to cross your arms, because that's the body language that they're giving you. So you can more or less follow what they're having to say, because traditionally, yes, crossed arms is closing yourself off to somebody else. Or if someone uses a lot of like hand gestures, like I do, if you were to use a lot of hand gestures with me, I would be like, man, I like that person. I don't know why I like that person, but I like that person, because my default mode is to use hand gestures. I just enjoy doing it. It makes me feel animated and alive. And I like when other people do that too. But I'm subconscious. I don't even realize that I enjoy seeing other people do that. But I know that it works. I know that it exists. So I'm glad that you brought that up. So the point is, and it's also really relevant because in the earlier segment of this workshop, I got everybody getting in the strategy story state, more specifically state where everyone's like freaking out, getting nuts, going wild, screaming at the top of their lungs. And the reason why we do that is because it releases endorphins in our brains. It gets us into a physical state conducive for being successful. And so I think the point that you brought up about having positive body language is so critical, because if we're not in the peak state, if we're stressed out, we're sad, mad, angry, dejected, jealous, or whatever's going on in our world that's making us feel negative, if we're bringing those vibes into a mentor meeting, a professional interview, an informational interview, or any setting, really any setting, we're destined for failure, because people can read our body language in a second.
Yeah, and actually that's a really interesting point to bring up too, because so often, like, it's really hard to say, oh, I am going to hold off on having these important conversations until I'm having a really good day. Because we never know what's going to make us have a really good day and a really bad day. So I think trying to practice ways to get ourselves to like pump ourselves up and know what helps us get recentered is important. For me, I've never really been much into meditating. I feel like maybe I've been able to learn how to control my thoughts, but that kind of came through practice, not through thinking, oh, this is meditation, but just through trying to be more purposeful of like, okay, what am I thinking? Being aware of my thoughts, and also being aware of how to kind of push them aside until I'm ready to deal with them. And also, I think you can do things like, I remember when I used to take exams, like I've taken the GMAT, and obviously I took the LSAT before I decided I didn't want to go to law school anymore. I'm currently taking the Chartered Financial Consultant exam because I wanted to help me with give me more credibility when I want to help students with managing their student debt and their finances for fiscal happiness. And I've taken the series exam. I would always have some music playing, and my song ended up being the Rocky theme song, Eye of the Tiger, just because it was like this really upbeat song that I could just kind of like, you know, sing it in my head, rock out in my head, and kind of pump myself up. And I ended up also doing that when I would go to interviews, when I, you know, let's say I was having a bad day or a great day. It was just kind of like the thing that I felt would get me centered and get me in the moment and like move away the rest of the day and anything else that I was doing before or after. Because if you do that, if you allow yourself to be in the moment, it kind of goes back to what we were originally saying about like, what does it mean to be genuine? It means to be in the moment with the person. And doing that requires like helping yourself get in the moment first. And if you can find a theme song, if you can find a jingle, if you can find, I don't know, a poem, whatever works for people, just like help yourself get in the moment so you can truly be there and be the best version of yourself regardless. You know, we all have things that go on the side. So like try to be the best person of yourself in the moment.
I love that. That's some serious neuro-linguistic programming right there. So one last question I want to ask, because we're starting to get towards the end of this workshop here, is how do you determine when is the right time to be vulnerable? When you're in a mentor conversation, when you're in a conversation with somebody that you really want to build a strong rapport with, how do you determine when is the right time to be vulnerable?
I think that my opinion of it would actually go to what you were saying about mirroring. So body language mirroring is definitely important, but then also this vulnerability and like the type of stories that you share is also part, I think mirroring would help there, because if someone is talking with you about, you know, all these wonderful things about their career or all these great things about their family or their friends or what they're planning to do, then if you end up talking about vulnerable things, then it would kind of show a mismatch of the flow of the conversation. And I think that in a first conversation, especially, it's important when you're trying to learn from somebody else to see, okay, how are they flowing? And, you know, what if you want to try to get to the point where you can share something vulnerable about yourself, I think it comes with some of the questions that you ask. And so you can ask them, what are some of the challenges that you had in your career? What are some of the challenges that you think that people who are starting out in your career today are facing? How have you, for women, right? Like, how have you managed having, you know, family obligations? I mean, maybe it's not this crew, but it's like, you know, when you're older, when you're in your late 20s or early 30s, you know, it's like, how do you manage having a family and your career responsibilities? How have your career ambitions influenced your decisions about having and starting a family? You know, those kinds of, when you ask other people about vulnerabilities in terms of a question and let them speak first, then read them and their response. And if they're comfortable telling you about their vulnerabilities, then I think you can share about your own. If they end up kind of casting it off and not really wanting to get into a vulnerability, or they talk about the positives in relation to it, then you know that that's not the right person to be able to share vulnerabilities with. And that's totally fine. You know, you have different people for different things.
So, Andrea, I think that's a really interesting point that you bring up about waiting to see if someone else would be vulnerable with you. I actually, respectfully, I disagree with that. And here's why. What I've observed, at least through facilitating a lot of mentoring relationships, is that really it's the first person to act is really the one that's essentially what I've learned is that for trust to occur, vulnerability needs to happen first, not the other way around. Like, you don't start trusting somebody before you're vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable first. So who's going to be the person that makes the first move? And I think that is the key question. I think most people's default is, I don't want to be vulnerable because I don't want to open myself up to be potentially judged negatively. But if you're willing to be the first person to open up and be maybe that more mature person in that relationship, you are inviting other people to open up to you. I know that when I shared my story, and I shared my story in workshop 1, I did that for the purpose of I want people to feel comfortable sharing their story with me and sharing their story with their mentor and where they're vulnerable. Because ultimately, asking questions where it may lead to them being vulnerable still takes a very mature person to actually answer with vulnerability. But if you are the person that's willing to be vulnerable first and say, hey, you know what, here's an area where I've really struggled and I've really hit a roadblock. I didn't really know exactly what my next move or next step would be. I'd love to, this is kind of like where I've really struggled. If you are willing to open up and be vulnerable yourself, in my opinion, I believe that will invite them to open up and be vulnerable with you. What do you think?
Well, I'm actually curious. So when you say about like being vulnerable, when do you think that would happen? Is that when you first meet someone? Is that after a couple of meetings?
I think it just depends on the person, but for me, I'm pretty early with being open and being vulnerable. Like I'm very open with sharing my story about being a drug dealer who got 5 felony distribution charges and was expelled from Indiana University. I'm very open about that story because one, it shows a lot of like who my true colors are and why I'm so motivated about mentoring relationships, because I needed mentors in my life. I mean, shoot, without mentors, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And so that vulnerability really helps people connect to me. I mean, I think sometimes when you're doing something, whether it be a good thing, a bad thing, or anything in between, people are always kind of like trying to figure out what's your angle or what are you trying to do this for? And I believe that the sooner you get to being vulnerable, the less they're thinking you've got some ulterior motive, and the more they start thinking like, this person's genuine. Like, this person just really cares about helping people. And like, how do I know that? I don't know. He just shared with me a story about like how he was a drug dealer and he got expelled from school and he had 5 felony distribution charges and had no idea what he was going to do with his life. And like, I think when people hear that story, they're like, whoa, that's cool. And by the way, I'm not expecting everybody to have that kind of story, but everybody's faced pain in their life. We more often not, unfortunately, choose to suppress it and try to push it down and try to not make it part of our like life and try to hide it. But I think the closer, the more open we are about our failures, one, the more likely we're to overcome them, and two, the more likely we're able to grow from them. I think Ray Dalio, who wrote a book called Principles, says pain plus reflection equals growth. I'm a firm believer in that. So I don't know. What do you think?
So I do agree that part of being genuine and having that trusting relationship that can truly flourish has to do with your full self and being okay representing what it is that, affects you, whether like the highs and the lows. I actually wrote an article about this last year because through giving out those smile cards that I held up earlier, I've realized that people tend to try to give a smile or help people who appear like visibly unhappy. And I feel like there are 3 different types of people out there. There are the people who are visibly unhappy, who tend to get most of the help, just because we feel like, for the bang for your buck, right? Like you feel like, oh, you're helping someone who for sure can get some kind of benefit from having help. But there are, I'd say the largest segment of our population are invisibly unhappy. And I call them masked crusaders. And those are people who, have something that is, maybe they're happy, but they also have other weights that are on their mind. But they're not comfortable being fully, representing their emotions on their sleeve. Because, society isn't ready for us to wear our emotions on our sleeve. And it can be difficult to open up and then not have that reciprocated back, which is, I think, why we tend to suppress it. There are also the genuinely happy people who are like signal boosters. And I feel like we all can be a combination of all of those, within the course of a month or even a day sometimes. And I feel like, just from my experience, I also tend to be genuine about, what it is that I'm experiencing, or like when I've had a rough day. I remember I ended up, having a day when I was just like so stressed that I ended up crying one morning at work. This was a couple of jobs back, and my friend ended up saying, "Oh, you look so radiant this morning," when she saw me later. And I was like, "Really?" Because I was crying earlier. And I told her, and I was open, and I explained to her, like, this was actually a difficult day. And I think that being open and genuine is definitely valuable. I think that maybe something, though, for your story, and also for the way that I've represented when I've had some kind of a week of, something that I've had the vulnerability to work through, it's important to find the balance of how you represent it, though. Because if you're representing it and you're kind of like looking at your shoes and really down, and it's like you're just kind of sulking in the vulnerability, it's different than if you're representing the vulnerability, but giving a body language that's open to having some positive change, or letting the person feel like they can help you. I think people do want to feel like they can help others if it's in their wheelhouse. Like some things are just going to be out of people's wheelhouses. And so that's where I believe that maybe starting with asking questions to get a sense for whether that person can help you with your vulnerabilities would be good. I can understand what you're saying about like good to be vulnerable first and help other people take you and know that it's not like you have an ulterior motive. I think that is actually a true and a good point. I just have felt like I've seen enough examples of times when, people are just not prepared to take vulnerability. And so if you yourself have any like uncertainty about how what your strength is to be able to be okay with people not taking it, then I think that's kind of like, maybe that can be it, right? So if you are comfortable expressing your vulnerability to someone, and regardless of whether they reciprocate or not, then it's okay to express it first. If you are not certain, then maybe feel people out and ask them some questions to see if your vulnerabilities, maybe it's about particular career, maybe it's about family, maybe it's about, uncertainty, how to do particular things, or just even something like, I don't know what to do with my career or my life. It's like, just feel people out first if you feel like you might not be okay getting a response that doesn't match with what you expected. I feel like that might be kind of the deciding line.
Yeah, I think that makes tons of sense. So Andrea, this has been an amazing workshop. I feel like we've covered so many really amazing points during this workshop this evening. I think the students are going to really love it. By the way, students, if you've got any questions for either myself or Andrea, please post them in the comments section, especially if you're posting them within 24 hours of this workshop going live. We will work towards getting to them ASAP. But thank you all for being here. Andrea, thank you so much for being here. I think your wisdom and insight was amazing. I really feel like you really went really deep on how to network in a genuine way, and I feel like the students in this workshop got a lot of value out of that. I would love to ask you, how can students get in touch with you? How can students find you? How can the people watching this learn more about you and some of the things that you're working towards?
Well, thank you for having me on. This has been a wonderful conversation. And thank you to everyone who participated in the workshop and listened as well, for spending your time here. LinkedIn, I will be happy to be your first connection if you don't have a LinkedIn set up already, or hopefully I'll be your 500th connection, so you'll have the 500 plus. So I am Andrea Constantine. My banner is smiley faces in case multiple Andrea Constantines come up, that you can share the link to my LinkedIn as well with everyone. If you'd like to follow along with some smiles and happiness, I also am on Instagram, Going for Smiles, and Fiscal Happiness also has its own Instagram, and that's more dedicated to my writing. So either Fiscal Happiness on Instagram or Going for Smiles. And in terms of networking and helping answer any further questions, people can feel free to send me a message or connection request on LinkedIn.
That's awesome. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for being here. Everybody, thank you for being here. Have a great rest of your night.
You too. Have a great night.